It was a morning like any other in the small town where life moved slowly and everyone knew each other's faces, if not their stories. The streets were quiet, with only the soft hum of early traffic and birds calling from the trees. She walked along the familiar path to the cafe she often visited, carrying a small leather bag that had seen better days. Her days were often quiet, filled with work, small errands, and long moments of reflection that no one ever noticed. She enjoyed the stillness, the routine that gave her a sense of control in a world that often felt unpredictable. He was sitting at a corner table in the same cafe, a cup of coffee in front of him and a notebook open, pages filled with scribbles and sketches. He was absorbed in his thoughts, his pen moving almost unconsciously, tracing lines that made little sense to anyone else but held meaning in his mind. Life had been challenging for him, filled with uncertainties and moments where he had felt invisible. Yet there was something about the way he observed the world that made him quietly remarkable. Neither of them knew it, but their paths were about to cross in a way that would change both their lives. She entered the cafe, the familiar chime of the door announcing her presence, and he looked up briefly just enough to notice her. There was nothing extraordinary about her appearance, no sudden flash of beauty or dramatic aura. She was just herself, with an air of quiet strength that drew attention without demanding it. For reasons he couldn't explain, he felt a tug at his heart, a curiosity that made him want to know her story. She ordered her usual drink and chose a table across from him, not realizing how close fate had placed them. She took out a book from her bag and began reading, her eyes moving slowly over the words, as if trying to lose herself in another world. He glanced at her from time to time, careful not to stare, but noticing little details, the way her fingers lingered on the pages, the slight smile that appeared when she read something that touched her. It was a simple moment, almost mundane. There was a quiet electricity in the air neither of them could name. Days passed, and the same routine continued. She came to the cafe in the mornings, he was there in his corner, and the small, unspoken recognition grew between them. Sometimes their eyes would meet briefly, and a silent acknowledgement would pass like a secret shared only between them. No words were spoken, yet a connection was forming, delicate and fragile, waiting for the right moment to be noticed. Life outside the cafe carried on with its usual challenges. She worked at a local office, managing tasks that often felt repetitive but necessary. She had dreams, quiet ambitions that she rarely shared with anyone, not out of pride, but from fear of disappointment. He worked as a freelance artist, taking odd jobs to make ends meet, pouring his emotions into drawings that few ever saw. Both had walls built around their hearts, shaped by past experiences and quiet disappointments. But neither knew that the other would soon help chip away at those walls. One rainy afternoon, she found herself running into the cafe to escape the sudden downpour. Her hair was damp, and her coat clung uncomfortably to her body. She shook off the water and quickly made her way to an empty table, unaware that he was watching with concern. The rain created a soft rhythm against the windows, and the warm scent of coffee and pastries filled the space. Making the world outside feel distant and unreachable, he finally decided to act. Something he had avoided for days out of nervousness. Gathering courage he didn't know he possessed, he approached her table with a tentative smile. "Is this seat taken?" he asked softly, his voice breaking the quiet hum of the cafe. She looked up, surprised, and shook her head. "No, please, sit," she replied, her voice calm but tinged with curiosity. He slid into the chair across from her, feeling a strange mix of excitement and fear. The conversation began slowly. Small talk about the rain, the cafe, and the town. But soon, it deepened naturally, as if they had known each other for years instead of minutes. She found herself sharing little details about her life, things she usually kept to herself. He listened with genuine interest, his responses thoughtful and kind, making her feel seen in a way that had been missing for a long time. It was in these small moments, these exchanges of words and glances, that the first threads of trust were woven. They discovered shared interests, laughter flowing easily between them, breaking the ice of years spent in cautious solitude. He showed her a small sketch he had drawn earlier, and she was struck by the way he captured emotions with simple lines. She admitted her love for books, and how stories often became her escape from reality. Each revelation, each gentle exchange, built a bridge between them that felt both fragile and unshakable. Days turned into weeks, and their meetings became the highlight of their routines. They would sit together in the cafe, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking about dreams, fears, and hopes. The world outside continued, full of its chaos and unpredictability. But within the walls of that small cafe, time seemed to slow down, allowing them to exist in a shared bubble of understanding and comfort. She began to notice small acts of kindness he performed. Unnoticed by anyone else, the way he would offer a helping hand to the barista, the gentle way he treated the stray cat outside the cafe, the patience he displayed when someone made a mistake. These actions, seemingly insignificant, spoke volumes about his character and made her heart stir in ways she had never experienced before. He, in turn, was captivated by her quiet strength, her ability to find beauty in simple things, and the way her laughter could light up a room without effort. He admired her resilience, the way she handled life's challenges without letting them harden her spirit. Each encounter left him wanting to know more, to be a part of her world, and to share his own hidden layers that he had long kept to himself. The first part of their story was not marked by grand gestures or dramatic events. It was shaped by small, meaningful moments, the silent understanding that grew with every glance, every word, and every shared smile. It was a beginning that neither of them could have anticipated, a meeting of souls that would slowly change their lives forever. And while the world outside continued unaware, inside that cafe, something extraordinary had begun, something simple yet profound. A love story that quietly touched hearts and hinted at the possibility of something greater yet to come. As days turned into weeks, their connection grew in ways neither of them had expected. It started with small gestures that felt natural, an extra smile, a shared joke, or a quiet moment of understanding across a crowded cafe. They began to notice details about each other that most people would overlook: the way he brushed a strand of hair from his face when he was thinking, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about something she loved. These small, intimate observations became the threads that slowly wove their lives together. She found herself looking forward to the mornings, to the moments when she could see him and share a cup of coffee. It was not the coffee itself, or even the comfort of the cafe, but the presence of someone who seemed to understand her without needing explanations. She realized that she could be herself, without pretense, without the masks she had grown accustomed to wearing in the outside world. There was a freedom in this, a relief that she had almost forgotten existed. He, too, felt a change he could not easily describe. Meeting her had stirred something deep within him, a sense of hope and curiosity he had long pushed away. Life had taught him caution, to guard his heart and expect little. Now, but her presence challenged that carefully constructed armor. He found himself thinking about her when she wasn't around, replaying their conversations and wondering about the moments he could have expressed more, or the times he wished he had been braver. Their conversations began to grow deeper, moving from casual topics to more personal ones. She shared stories of her childhood, moments of joy and sorrow, and the dreams she carried quietly in her heart. He spoke about his struggles, the doubts that often kept him awake at night, and the small victories that made life worth living. They discovered that their worlds, though different in many ways, had similarities in the emotions that shaped them: longings for connection, moments of loneliness, and the desire to be understood. One afternoon, they decided to take a walk through the nearby park. The air was crisp, and the sunlight filtered gently through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the path. It was the kind of walk where words were not always necessary, where silence spoke volumes. They talked about the simple things: birds in the trees, the changing colors of the leaves, the sounds of children playing in the distance. Yet even in these mundane conversations, there was a growing intimacy, a sense that they were slowly learning the rhythm of each other's hearts. During these walks, they also faced small challenges that tested their connection. There were moments of miscommunication, times when unspoken fears surfaced, and disagreements that seemed trivial but held hidden emotions. Yet, rather than driving them apart, These moments became opportunities to understand each other more deeply. They learned to listen, to be patient, and to accept that vulnerability was not a weakness, but a bridge to true closeness. Outside the cafe and the park, their lives continued with their usual routines, but now with a new dimension. She noticed herself smiling more, even during tedious office tasks. Thinking of the conversations she would have with him later, he found inspiration in everyday moments, sketches flowing more freely, fueled by the emotions she stirred within him. Their bond was subtle, yet undeniable. Like a quiet current running beneath the surface of their daily lives, they also began to share small acts of kindness for each other. He would leave a sketch or a note on her table, something to brighten her day, while she would occasionally bring a favorite pastry or a book she thought he might enjoy. These gestures were not grand or dramatic, but they carried a weight of thoughtfulness that spoke louder than words. It was in these moments that they realized the depth of care they had developed. The unspoken understanding that they were becoming important to each other, friends and acquaintances began to notice a change in them, subtle but evident. There was a lightness in her demeanor, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. He carried himself differently too, more relaxed, more open, as if a part of him had been awakened by the connection they shared. They didn't need to announce their bond. It was visible in the way they carried themselves, in the way their smiles lingered a little longer, in the glances that spoke volumes without a single word. Yet, despite the growing closeness, there was an undercurrent of uncertainty. Both of them had past experiences that made opening their hearts fully a daunting prospect. She sometimes questioned whether she should let herself feel so deeply, fearing the pain that might come if things didn't work out. He wrestled with self-doubt, wondering if he was worthy of someone who seemed so genuine and kind. These moments of hesitation were natural, reminders that love, even in its gentlest form, required courage. One rainy evening, they found themselves sheltering under the awning of a small bookstore, laughter escaping as they dodged puddles and tried to keep their books dry. In that spontaneous moment, the barriers between them seemed to dissolve. She noticed the softness in his eyes, a vulnerability that matched her own, and she felt a surge of warmth and comfort. He reached out instinctively, brushing a raindrop from her cheek, and the touch lingered just long enough to make their hearts race. It was a simple act, yet it spoke volumes, firming the growing bond between them as the days went by. Their connection continued to deepen through shared experiences and quiet moments. They explored hidden corners of the town, visited local markets, and sat by the river watching the water flow endlessly. Each experience was ordinary in isolation, but extraordinary because they shared it together. They began to create memories that were theirs alone, small treasures that would later become the foundation of their story. They also began to confront their fears together, offering encouragement and support. She helped him navigate moments of self-doubt, reminding him of his talents and the beauty of his perspective on the world. He, in turn, provided reassurance and understanding when she faced challenges, offering a steady presence that made her feel less alone. In each other, they found a partnership that was nurturing, equal, and comforting, a rare kind of companionship that grew quietly yet powerfully. Their bond began to influence the way they saw the world. Simple acts of kindness, once unnoticed, now carried more meaning. They became more attuned to the emotions of others, more empathetic, and more aware of the fleeting beauty in everyday moments. Their love was not loud or dramatic, but it was transformative, shaping the way they interacted with the world and with themselves. Evenings spent together often ended with long conversations under the soft glow of streetlights, discussing dreams, fears, and everything in between. They discovered shared values and aspirations, the kind of alignment that made them feel as if they had found a rare companion in a world full of strangers. Each conversation strengthened their trust, deepened their understanding, and created a sense of safety that allowed them to be fully themselves. There were moments of playfulness, too, laughter spilling over small jokes, teasing remarks, and shared stories from their pasts. These moments created a balance, reminding them that love was not only about seriousness and depth, but also about joy, spontaneity, and the lightness that comes from being truly seen and accepted. Through all of this, they began to understand that their connection was not just about companionship, but about growth. They encouraged each other to pursue passions, to face fears, and to embrace life with openness. The bond they shared became a source of strength, a reminder that they were capable of love that was patient, understanding, and resilient. By the end of this period, it was clear that their relationship had moved beyond casual acquaintance or friendship. It had become a partnership built on mutual respect, trust, and a growing affection that neither could ignore. They had discovered a rare and gentle love, one that didn't demand grand declarations but thrived in quiet consistency and shared understanding in the stillness of the early mornings. During walks in the park and in the warmth of the cafe, they had found a rhythm together, a rhythm that felt natural, comforting, and deeply human. And while the future was still uncertain, one thing was clear. They had begun a journey together that would shape their lives in ways neither could have imagined. Their love was growing, quietly yet powerfully, and with each passing day, it touched not only their hearts, but also the small world around them, leaving an impression that was subtle, enduring, and unforgettable. Life had a way of testing even the strongest bonds, and theirs was no exception. As their connection grew stronger, small challenges began to appear, testing their patience, trust, and emotional resilience. It started subtly, with misunderstandings that arose from different perspectives. A word taken the wrong way, a message misread, or a day when one was too tired to listen fully. These moments, though small, brought attention neither of them had anticipated. They realized that love was not only about joy and comfort, but also about facing difficulties together and learning to navigate them. One afternoon, she received unexpected news at work that required her to take on additional responsibilities. The stress weighed heavily on her, leaving her tense and irritable. He noticed her withdrawal but struggled to find the right words to help. When he tried to reach out, she unintentionally snapped, not at him personally, but out of frustration. He felt a sting, a sense of distance that had not existed before. Yet he chose patience over anger, understanding that her reaction came from pressure, not a lack of care for him. This was the first lesson they encountered together: the importance of empathy in moments of tension. At the same time, he faced his own challenges. A significant opportunity arose in his work as an artist, demanding long hours and intense focus. It required travel to a nearby city, which meant leaving for days at a time. He was torn between pursuing a chance that could change his career and the fear of leaving her alone, worried that distance might weaken the bond they had built. When he finally told her, she felt a mix of pride and fear. Pride for his talent and ambition, but fear of the unknown that lay ahead for them. It was a test of trust, patience, and the depth of their feelings. During the days he was away, they maintained contact through messages and calls, but it was not the same as being together. She missed the simplicity of sitting across from him, sharing coffee, and exchanging smiles. He missed her presence, the way she made ordinary moments feel extraordinary. Yet, the separation also brought clarity. They realized that their connection was not based on proximity alone, but on the emotional bond they had cultivated. They began to appreciate the value of patience, understanding, and trust. Recognizing that challenges could strengthen love if faced with care, they also faced moments of misunderstanding that tested their communication. A casual comment might be interpreted differently, or an unspoken expectation could create tension. In these times, they learned to pause, to listen, and to ask rather than assume. They discovered that love required more than affection. It demanded awareness, humility, and the courage to admit mistakes. Every disagreement became an opportunity to grow closer, teaching them that resilience in love came not from avoiding conflict, but from navigating it together. Outside of personal challenges, they presented external pressures. Friends and family sometimes expressed opinions, questions, or concerns about their relationship. These opinions, though often well-meaning, added complexity to their journey. She occasionally felt the weight of judgment from those who did not fully understand the depth of their connection. While he struggled with the expectation to prove his worth, together they learned to create boundaries, to protect the intimacy they had nurtured, and to prioritize the relationship over external noise. Amid these challenges, small acts of reassurance became their anchors. He would leave notes of encouragement when he was away, reminding her of his thoughts and care. She would share little stories of her day, adding humor or warmth, so he felt connected despite the distance. These gestures, though simple, were profound. They reinforced the message that love was not only felt in grand declarations but in consistency, attention, and thoughtfulness. One evening, they found themselves in a quiet moment at the cafe, reflecting on the difficulties they had recently faced. The rain poured outside, creating a soft rhythm against the windows. They shared their fears and vulnerabilities openly, acknowledging the tension that had arisen in recent days. In that conversation, they found a new depth of understanding. They realized that love required courage not just in moments of joy but also in moments of uncertainty. The honesty they shared in that evening became a turning point, a reminder that vulnerability could strengthen rather than weaken. The bond between them, their connection, was also tested by moments of self-doubt. She questioned whether she could fully trust someone with her heart, haunted by past disappointments. He wondered if he was deserving of such unwavering affection, struggling with insecurities that threatened to cast shadows over their joy. Yet, in each other, they found reassurance. They reminded one another of the value they brought into each other's lives, the ways in which they had grown, and the shared commitment to nurture the love they had discovered. Through these trials, they began to understand the power of patience. They learned that love was not always immediate or effortless. It required time to build, moments of reflection, and the willingness to face discomfort together. The challenges they encountered were not signs of weakness, but opportunities to strengthen the foundation of their relationship. Each resolved misunderstanding, each supportive gesture, and each honest conversation became a brick in the growing structure of trust and commitment between them. Amid the trials, there were also moments of beauty and triumph. A shared laugh after a tense moment, a comforting touch during a difficult day, or a quiet celebration of a small achievement reminded them why they were drawn to each other. These moments became reminders that love was a balance of struggle and joy, and that resilience often brought the sweetest rewards. They began to see that their journey was not defined solely by challenges, but by the way they chose to navigate them together. One particularly challenging week tested their connection in unexpected ways. Miscommunication, professional stress, and the pressure of outside opinions converged, creating tension that felt almost overwhelming. Yet, instead of breaking apart, they leaned into the discomfort. They spent long evenings talking, clarifying intentions, and expressing emotions they had previously held back. The process was not easy, but it deepened their understanding and appreciation for one another. By the end of the week, they emerged stronger, with renewed trust and a clearer sense of commitment. Through all of this, their love became more resilient, more intentional, and more profound. They realized that true connection was not about avoiding difficulties, but about facing them together. With patience, empathy, and unwavering care, they began to understand that love was not only an emotion but a practice, a series of choices made daily to support, understand, and nurture one another in quieter moments. They reflected on how far they had come. The challenges they faced had revealed their strengths, vulnerabilities, and shared values. They had learned to communicate more effectively, to offer support without judgment, and to trust the bond they had built. Each obstacle had been an opportunity to grow, individually and together, shaping a love that was deeper, richer, and more resilient than either could have imagined. As the days continued, they found joy in the simple act of being present for each other. Walking through the park, sharing meals, or sitting together in silence became moments of profound connection. They had learned that love was not always about grand gestures or dramatic moments, but about consistent care, understanding, and the willingness to face life's challenges hand in hand. By the end of this period, they understood that their relationship had reached a new level. They had faced trials, confronted fears, and navigated misunderstandings. Yet each challenge had strengthened the bond between them, creating a foundation of trust, empathy, and shared commitment. Their love had been tested and had grown stronger, revealing a resilience that would carry them. Through future challenges, the trials they endured also prepared them for the wider world. They began to see that love, when nurtured with patience and understanding, could withstand not only personal challenges but external pressures as well. They had discovered a rare and enduring partnership, one that balanced joy with struggle, laughter with reflection, and vulnerability with strength. It was a love that had been tempered by trials and emerged more luminous for it, ready to face the future together with courage and hope after the storms they had faced. Life slowly began to settle into a calmer rhythm. The tension that once hovered between them started to fade, replaced by a deeper sense of understanding. They no longer feared difficult conversations. Instead, they welcomed them, knowing that honesty had brought them closer every time. Their love no longer felt fragile. It felt grounded, steady, and real. He returned from his work trips with a renewed sense of purpose. The opportunity he had taken began to open doors, not in loud or flashy ways, but through quiet recognition of his effort. People started to notice his work, to appreciate the emotions behind his art. Though success was slow, it was meaningful. She stood beside him through every step, offering encouragement when doubts crept in, and celebrating even the smallest wins. Her belief in him became a source of strength he leaned on more than he ever admitted. She, too, experienced change. At work, her confidence grew. She spoke up more, shared ideas she once kept to herself, and earned respect through consistency and dedication. Those around her noticed the difference. She seemed calmer, more assured, and quietly joyful. Much of that confidence came from knowing she was not alone anymore. She had someone who saw her fully and stood with her. Even when the path ahead was unclear, their bond began to ripple outward, touching the people around them in unexpected ways. Friends noticed how they listened to each other, how they handled disagreements with care instead of anger. Family members saw the patience and respect they shared. Without trying to prove anything, their relationship became an example of what steady, thoughtful love could look like. People started to ask questions, to seek advice, or simply to sit quietly and observe. One evening, they were invited to a small community gathering where local artists and workers shared their stories. He hesitated at first, unsure if his work was ready to be seen. She gently encouraged him, reminding him how far he had come. When he finally agreed, he displayed a few simple sketches, each one carrying a piece of his journey. As people stopped to look, something unexpected happened. They felt moved. Some smiled softly. Others grew quiet, lost in thought. A few shared personal stories that his work had stirred within them. That night marked a turning point. His art was no longer just personal expression. It became a bridge between people, a way to connect emotions that words often failed to capture. She watched from the side, pride shining in her eyes. Seeing him step into his purpose filled her with warmth and gratitude. In that moment, she realized that love was not only about support during hard times, but also about standing back and allowing the other person to shine. Their story began to spread quietly. Someone shared a photo of his artwork online, along with a short message about perseverance and love. Others shared it again. Messages started coming in from strangers who felt inspired, who saw pieces of their own lives reflected in his work and in the story behind it. Though neither of them sought attention, they could not deny the impact their journey was beginning to have. At first, the attention felt overwhelming. They worried about misunderstandings, about having their private moments exposed. But they remained grounded by focusing on what mattered most. They stayed close, continued their routines, and reminded each other that their love did not exist for approval. It existed because it was real, because it had been tested, and because it had chosen to endure. With time, they learned to share only what felt right. They spoke honestly when asked, focusing not on perfection, but on effort, patience, and growth. People resonated with their honesty. It was not a fairy tale. It was real life, filled with fear, doubt, mistakes, and hope. That truth made their story powerful. They also began giving back in small ways. He volunteered to teach basic drawing to children at a local center. She helped organize small gatherings where people could talk openly about challenges, dreams, and healing. Together, they created spaces where others felt seen and heard. These moments reinforced a simple truth: love multiplied when shared with kindness. Despite the growing recognition, they never lost sight of the quiet moments that had started everything. Mornings at the cafe, walks through the park, evenings filled with conversation and laughter. These moments remained sacred. They reminded each other that before the attention, before the impact, there was simply two people choosing each other every day. There were still challenges, of course. Life did not suddenly become perfect. There were tired days, moments of frustration, and times when doubts resurfaced. But now they faced these moments with confidence born from experience. They knew how to listen, how to pause, and how to return to each other with patience. As their story continued to reach more people, they felt a quiet responsibility. Not to impress, but to remain honest. They understood that their love had become a reminder to others that meaningful connection was possible, even in a world that often felt rushed and distant. This awareness deepened their commitment, not just to each other, but to living with intention and compassion. One evening, sitting together under a sky full of stars, they reflected on how much had changed. Neither of them could have predicted this path. What began as simple conversations and shared coffee had grown into something that touched many lives. They held hands in silence, feeling grateful, humbled, deeply connected. In that stillness, they understood that the true triumph was not recognition or success. It was the way they had grown together, faced challenges without losing kindness, and built a love rooted in respect and patience. Their journey was no longer just their own. It had become a quiet source of hope for others. As they looked ahead, the future still held uncertainty, but it no longer frightened them. They trusted the foundation they had built. They trusted each other, and they knew that whatever came next, they would face it together, carrying forward a love that had already proven its strength and its power to inspire. Time moved forward, not in sudden leaps, but in steady steps that felt gentle and real. Their lives continued to unfold side by side, shaped by choices they made together and moments they learned to treasure. What once felt uncertain now felt familiar, not because life had become easier, but because they had learned how to face it as a team. The attention their story had received slowly settled into the background. Messages still arrived from people who felt inspired, from strangers who said their journey gave them hope during difficult times. They read these messages quietly, often late at night, reflecting on how something so personal had reached so many hearts. They never responded to all of them, but each message reminded them of the responsibility that came with being seen. Not a burden, but a reminder to stay honest and kind. They remained careful to protect what mattered most. Their relationship was not built for display. It was built on trust, shared effort, and quiet understanding. They continued to meet at the cafe where it all began, sometimes speaking for hours, sometimes sitting in comfortable silence. Those moments grounded them, reminding them that love did not need an audience to be meaningful. As the seasons changed, so did their dreams. He began working on a larger creative project, one that reflected not just his struggles, but the hope he had found through connection. She supported him with patience, offering feedback, encouragement, and space when needed. She understood his process now, the way creativity required both solitude and support. Their respect for each other's individual paths only deepened their bond. She also began exploring dreams she had once placed aside. With his encouragement, she took steps toward work that felt more aligned with her values. It was not an easy transition. There were moments of fear and doubt, nights filled with questions about whether she was making the right choice. But each time uncertainty arose, he stood beside her, reminding her of her strength and resilience. Their belief in each other became a steady source of courage. Together, they learned that love was not about losing oneself, but about growing alongside another person. They celebrated individuality while honoring togetherness. This balance allowed their relationship to breathe, to evolve without pressure or fear. They understood that lasting love was built not on perfection, but on acceptance and shared effort. They continued giving back in small, meaningful ways. The creative workshops grew into a regular gathering, bringing together people from different walks of life. The open conversations she helped organize became safe spaces for reflection and healing. These efforts were not grand or widely advertised, but they mattered deeply to those involved. Watching others find comfort and inspiration brought them quiet joy. One evening, after a long day, they walked through the park where they had once shared hesitant conversations. The trees stood tall, leaves rustling softly in the breeze. They spoke about how far they had come, not with pride, but with gratitude. They remembered the early uncertainty, the misunderstandings, the fears they had faced. Those memories no longer carried pain. Instead, they served as reminders of growth and resilience. There were still disagreements, in moments when emotions ran high or stress crept in. But now, they approached these moments differently. They paused, listened, and chose understanding over reaction. They had learned that conflict did not mean failure. It was simply part of two imperfect people learning to live and love together. As years passed, their bond continued to mature. Love became quieter, deeper, and more steady. It showed itself in everyday actions, shared meals, thoughtful check-ins, gentle reassurances. These moments formed the true shape of their relationship. Far removed from dramatic gestures or public praise, occasionally, someone would recognize them from a shared story or a piece of art and thank them for their honesty. These encounters always surprised them. They never set out to inspire millions. They had only tried to be real, to love with patience and care. That authenticity was what people connected with, and they remained humbled by it. One night, sitting together under soft light, they talked about the future, not with rigid plans or expectations, but with openness. They spoke about the kind of life they wanted to build, one rooted in kindness, creativity, and mutual respect. They knew challenges would continue to arise, but they trusted their ability to face them together. They understood now that love was not a destination. It was a journey that required daily choice and effort. It was about showing up, even on hard days, about listening when it was easier to turn away, about choosing compassion again and again. Their story did not end with a dramatic moment or a perfect conclusion. Instead, it continued quietly, unfolding through ordinary days filled with meaning. And perhaps that was why it touched so many hearts. It was not a story of flawless romance, but of real people choosing love, patience, and growth. In the end, what they built together was more than a relationship. It was a shared life shaped by trust, resilience, and deep connection. A reminder that one genuine love, rooted in honesty and care, could ripple outward and touch countless lives. And so, without grand declarations or final words, their story continued. Not as a moment frozen in time, but as a living example of what love could be when nurtured with intention. One love story, born from simple beginnings, that quietly touched millions and continued to inspire long after the spotlight faded, even after everything they had built together. Life continued to surprise them in quiet ways. Love did not freeze time. It moved with it, adapting, stretching, and sometimes asking more of them than they expected. What remained constant was the way they chose each other, again and again, even when the path ahead felt unclear as more people reached out, sharing how the story had helped them heal, forgive, or try again at love. Both of them felt a deeper sense of purpose. They never claimed to have answers. They simply shared their truth when asked. They spoke about effort, about patience, about how love was often found in listening rather than speaking. This honesty resonated more than perfection ever could. One message stood out among the many. It came from someone who said their story had helped them step away from loneliness and reach out for connection. Reading it left them quiet for a long time. They realized then that their journey was no longer just about them. Without meaning to, they had become a reminder that healing and connection were possible. Even after disappointment, this realization did not change who they were, but it deepened how they lived. They became more intentional with their time, more aware of the small ways they could show kindness. Love, they learned, was not limited to one relationship. It expanded into friendships, community, and moments of simple human care. They continued their routines, but with added meaning. Morning walks turned into moments of reflection. Shared meals became opportunities to check in with each other's hearts. Even silence felt rich, filled with comfort rather than distance. They had grown into a love that no longer needed constant reassurance. Trust lived quietly between them. There were moments when fear returned. Thoughts about the future, about loss, about change. But now, they faced those fears together, speaking them aloud instead of letting them grow in isolation. They learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to face it hand in hand. One year, during a simple celebration with close friends, someone asked what had kept them strong through so much change. They exchanged a glance, sharing an unspoken understanding. The answer was simple. They had chosen honesty over comfort, patience over pride, and kindness over being right. Love for them was built from these daily choices. Their influence continued quietly. Some people began small creative projects of their own. Others repaired relationships or allowed themselves to hope again. Though they rarely spoke publicly anymore, the story lived on through the actions of those it had touched. This was the legacy they valued most. As time passed, they learned to appreciate aging together. Changes that once might have scared them now felt natural. Lines formed around smiles. Energy shifted. But affection remained, deepened by shared history and mutual respect. Love no longer felt urgent. It felt steady and warm. There were days filled with laughter and days marked by fatigue or worry. Yet even on difficult days, there was comfort in knowing they were not facing life alone. A hand held during silence often meant more than words ever could. They spoke less about dreams of recognition and more about dreams of peace, a life filled with purpose, gentle routines, and meaningful connection. They understood that happiness was not something to chase. It was something to nurture slowly and intentionally. Looking back, they sometimes marveled at how a simple meeting had shaped so much. A shared table, a quiet conversation, a willingness to open up. From those small beginnings, love had grown that touched countless lives without ever trying to impress. Their story was never about perfection or fate. It was about effort, growth, and choosing love in ordinary moments. It was proof that deep connection did not require grand beginnings. It's only sincerity and patience. As the years continued, they remained grounded in the present. They understood that no chapter was final. Life would continue to write new pages, each one shaped by how they chose to respond. And whatever came next, they trusted the bond they had built. In the end, their love became something quiet but powerful. Not a headline, not a performance, but a steady presence. A reminder that one real love lived honestly could leave a mark far beyond its own story. And so, without knowing how many more chapters lay ahead, they kept walking forward together. Not chasing attention, not seeking applause, simply living, loving, and allowing their story to continue touching lives in ways they might never fully see. Years continued to pass, each day bringing subtle changes that shaped their shared journey. Life, as always, was unpredictable, filled with unexpected twists, moments of joy, and challenges that tested their bond. Yet through it all, they moved forward together, their connection growing stronger in ways both visible and unseen. The world around them continued at its usual pace. Neighbors came and went, seasons shifted, and small events that might have seemed insignificant to others became moments of meaning for them. They cherished these small slices of life, a shared breakfast, a quiet walk, a conversation that stretched long into the evening. They understood that love was not always about grand gestures, but about these steady, reliable acts of care that showed up consistently. They also began to notice how much they had influenced each other's growth. He had become more patient, more open to emotion, and more willing to share his thoughts without fear. She had become more confident, more willing to take risks, and more attuned to her own needs and desires. Together, they were learning that a strong partnership allowed each individual to flourish while maintaining deep connection. One afternoon, he visited a small art exhibit that featured local artists. He admired the creativity around them, but found himself quietly reflecting on how far he had come. The sketches that once only filled his private notebook were now being appreciated by strangers. Not for perfection, but for authenticity. She noticed the pride in his eyes and felt a wave of gratitude for the journey they had shared. It was a quiet acknowledgement that success and love often come together when nurtured with patience and dedication. During this time, they faced new kinds of challenges. Health concerns arose, small disagreements about priorities flared, and unexpected responsibilities tested their ability to support each other. Yet, unlike before, they approached these moments with calm understanding. They had learned that love was strengthened not by avoiding difficulties, but by facing them with patience, honesty, and teamwork. Each challenge was a reminder that life's difficulties were easier when shared. They also continued to impact those around them in subtle ways. Friends and acquaintances often remarked on the quiet stability of their relationship, noticing how they listened deeply, supported one another, and approached life with balance and respect. Without trying, they became a source of inspiration for people who witnessed their journey. Their story, once private and personal, had taken on a life of its own, touching hearts through small actions rather than dramatic declarations. Even as they grew older, they remained curious about the world and about each other. Conversations continued to explore dreams, fears, and the small wonders of everyday life. They shared laughter, lighthearted teasing, and reflections on past experiences. The intimacy they had built over the years allowed them to be vulnerable without fear, to share truths that could have been hidden, and to celebrate each other's growth. There were also moments of quiet reflection where they considered the legacy of their journey. The messages they had received over the years, from strangers expressing gratitude, reminded them that love and kindness ripple outward in ways one cannot always see. They realized that their story had become more than just a personal narrative. It was an example of perseverance, care, and authenticity that inspired others to believe in connection and hope in the everyday rhythm of life. They found deep satisfaction. Shared meals, laughter over small mistakes, and gentle encouragement became the foundation of their days. They no longer needed external validation. Their bond was its own reward, reinforced by countless small moments of attention, understanding, and mutual care. They also embraced change together. When opportunities arose that required moving or shifting routines, they approached them as a team, weighing options and supporting one another. These decisions, though sometimes difficult, were made with shared values and consideration for the other's happiness. Through these choices, they learned that flexibility, compromise, and mutual respect were essential pillars of enduring love. One evening, during a quiet walk along a familiar street, they paused under a large oak tree. The leaves rustled in the wind, and the soft light of sunset cast long shadows. They spoke about the future not in grand plans, but in simple hopes for continued health, connection, and the ability to remain present for each other. The conversation was peaceful, affirming the depth of trust and comfort they had cultivated over the years, through all the ordinary moments. Their love continued to grow in subtle, powerful ways. It was visible in the way they anticipated each other's needs, in the gentle touches that conveyed reassurance, and in the laughter that arose from shared understanding. Their bond had become a living, breathing presence in their lives, shaping decisions, emotions, and perspectives. They also recognized the importance of gratitude. Each day offered moments for appreciation, simple gestures, smiles, and acts of kindness. They expressed thanks to each other frequently, acknowledging the support, patience, and care that had become the lifeblood of their relationship. Gratitude became a practice, a quiet ritual that reinforced their bond and reminded them of the love they had chosen to nurture. As their story continued to unfold, they remained humble in the face of its impact. They never sought fame or recognition, but they acknowledged with quiet pride that the life they had built and the love they shared had touched lives.
Out.
Beyond their immediate circle, this understanding deepened their appreciation for the journey and inspired them to continue living with intention and kindness. even in moments of uncertainty. They found strength in each other. Whether facing health scares, unexpected responsibilities, or the normal stresses of life, they relied on communication, patience, and empathy. Each challenge was met not as an individual, but as a partnership, reinforcing the lessons they had learned about resilience and shared effort. Over time, they also became mentors in subtle ways. People close to them sought guidance, comfort, or simply an example of enduring connection. They offered advice, support, and listening ears, always careful not to impose, but to help others discover their own paths. Through this quiet mentorship, they extended the reach of their love and care, allowing it to ripple outward naturally. The years also brought reflection on the journey itself. They remembered the small beginnings, a shared table, quiet conversations, tentative glances. Those early moments, seemingly insignificant at the time, it blossomed into a lifetime of connection, growth, and shared experience. They understood that the foundation of their story was built not on fate or chance alone, but on choices, small, deliberate, and consistent choices to invest in each other in their daily lives. They continued to find joy in the ordinary, preparing meals together, tending to small tasks. Sharing stories from the day all became opportunities to reinforce their connection. The love that had once been new and fragile had matured into a steady, comforting presence. It was a love that sustained, nurtured, and inspired, both within and beyond their immediate circle. They also found new ways to explore the world together. Simple trips, quiet adventures, and shared experiences allowed them to continue learning, laughing, and